everything I'd ever want to do in a song, but I know I could never produce something of this quality, no matter how hard I try. That's how in awe I am of Linkin Park.
Hey everyone, Nikki here, and welcome to the Riff Yard. As ever, I am joined by the best team in music journalism in the world right now, Rodders and Orla Joyce. Guys, how you doing? We're in a big one today. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Ready to rock.
Okay, guys, we're going to be dissecting in retrospect the amazing Linkin Park record Meteora, and we've got some very, very unique angles how we're going to come at this, and I'm really excited for this one. I'm really buzzing for this because already just a little pre-show chat on it, my juices are flowing. I'm tingling. I'm ready to be going for this. So I think I'm going to hand this over to Rod.
So first off, I mean, what an album, but 20 years, my God, it makes you feel old, doesn't it? So I guess for me, Meteora was a great album. I was a huge Linkin Park fan, but what maybe I have a little bit of, I don't know, insider information. At that time, my band Violent Delight, we were on the same label as Warner's. We didn't like know the band or anything like that, but a lot of the team that worked our record and the people that we knew at the studio, at the label, were working Meteora, and they were so excited about this record. I guess my kind of peak years in the industry were at the same time as this album coming out. It's one of my favorite records, so I'm really going to be flying the Linkin Park flag strong. And to revisit it and talk about the impact that it's had on me and so many people around the world is going to be really, really interesting.
I feel like I have the polar opposite experience to you because when it came out for me, I was still in primary school. My brother was like really into rock music, and that's how I found Linkin Park. So Gnome Encore was the first ever single that I bought. So like I have a lot of nostalgia associated with it because it was one of my gateway albums into the whole entire rock genre. Even as a kid, I could still understand that this was a big album. This album meant something. And I was like maybe 9, 10. But that's the impact that it had across generations, really. And still does.
And what about you, Nikki?
See, I've got a very different take on it because my younger brother was very much into Linkin Park and my mum was as well. So it was always there, but it never connected with me. I didn't listen to Hybrid Theory and not Meteora either, And in fact, actually, don't slate me in the comments here, the first time I've ever listened to Meteora from front to back was about 2 hours ago.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I know. I feel it already. But for me, I caught a different wave of music. Even though I love heavy music and everything like that, but I didn't dislike it. If it was on a compilation CD, a Kerrang compilation CD or something, I wouldn't be skipping the track, but I wouldn't be making the effort to go out and listen to it. So therefore, it kind of will pass me by. But I could still see the impact it was having. And, being from Jersey as well at the time, you're in this tiny bubble and it was just everyone looked like they could be a member of Linkin Park. All of a sudden, you start seeing flame tattoos on people's wrists and stuff.
Like these?
Yes, there you go. Oh. Yeah, yes. Like all of that stuff was everywhere, but I was in the kind of Silverchair diorama camp, so I had all that stuff, and that was where kind of my brain was at. But you couldn't ignore just the sheer impact that it was having on a generation.
Well, it bucked a trend, right? I think just to kind of start talking about this, it all begins with Hybrid Theory, and Hybrid Theory, when you put it into perspective, was at the time the biggest record of the 21st century. It was a new thing back then. For a debut artist, that's an incredible weight of expectation. I've got the numbers on their discography, and Hybrid Theory sold 30 million copies. We all know, the sophomore, the follow-up record is seen as such a difficult thing. There's so many bands who have struggled with a second record, or Weezer, Pinkerton. I think it's their greatest album, but it was a complete commercial flop. Some bands, they put out great second records that they just don't connect with the audience again. And when you look back on these numbers, Meteora came out with so much expectation. And, just before we went on, we were talking about 2003 was a year that, St. Anger was released. I believe Audio Slave released their debut album. Billy Corgan put out Zwan. Evanescence came out with Bring Me to Life in that year. There were huge releases in rock music. And, Linkin Park at some point must have been thinking, are we the real deal? Is Hybrid Theory going to be a flash in the pan? Is Meteora going to be the biggest letdown of all? And when you go back and you look at the numbers, Meteora sold 27 million copies. That is unreal. They cemented the fact that they were the biggest rock band on the planet at that time. And I think that's amazing, So yeah, should we just dive in? Should we just listen to the first track on the album? There we go. First track on the album. What do you think, guys?
Best one by far.
I don't know. Just when I heard that for the first time, the increment in the speed and it's building up and it's slowly turning into a beat, and I was like, "Oh man, this is going to be special." Did you get that 2 hours ago, Nikki?
I did actually. Do you know what? I tried to, rather than sit there and be like, with it, which sometimes I don't think is the best way to, especially a record like this. I think you just need to let your subconscious take it. So I was just kind of milling around, had it blaring, stuck it on straight away. I could feel the anticipation immediately. Like, okay, something's going on. I didn't need to kind of go like, what's going to happen type of thing. I felt it, and the building there is amazing. And it's interesting to go to your point there, to people watching and listening. Orla Rod sent me a 30-minute documentary to watch, which I also managed to watch for the first time a couple of hours ago. And coming to what Rod was saying about the samples, something very interesting there is that they were talking about samples were just going over to CD decks at the time. A thorn in their side to making their own samples and what have you is that they had to send it off to be pressed onto vinyl and then wait for it to come back. When with the CD deck stuff, they just burn it to a disc, bang, it was instant. So even then, you think how at the forefront of musical technology they were still hindered in their time with that. That's still adding pressures on that time. The dedication to the details, they were willing to sacrifice those precious studio minutes, hours, days, weeks to make sure those samples were perfect. Very, very interesting, the dedication on that.
Cool. Right. Let's listen to Don't Stay. So it's the second track on the album, but for a lot of people, this is the opening track.
It makes me happy hearing that.
I mean,
yeah, it's such a strong start. Like I know a kind of opening track for some people. Like I think if people were worried after Hybrid Theory about what they're going to expect, I think after that track they're like, okay, we're probably good for the whole album.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, there's so much going on that track that is just, and again, going back to that documentary we were talking about, the process they had where they talk about writing 80 songs, then scrapping it, and then they get the album, they write another batch of songs, they feel it's the one, they go into the studio with Don Gilmore, and then he picks them all apart again and rebuilds them. And I don't know, I just think this album is like a songwriting masterclass. There's so many layers, and there's a great bit in that doc where Don Gilmore talks about when him in Cleveland listens to this song, I think about what he's going to hear the first time, but I'm also interested in what he's going to hear the 100th time. With songs like this, you hear so much. And even just listening to that now, it takes me back to listening to that for the first time. But every time I listen to it, there's something else you hear. The vocal comes in, they have that little duh, 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 duh. And then the next part of the song, there's just that little bit more intensity on the guitar. And this is all about build up. This is all expectation and just people would have we've been so hyped for this record, and then when you put it on for the temperature just to be rising and rising and rising and rising, it's one of my favorite first tracks, even if it's the second track.
It has for me has echoes of One Step Closer in there, in kind of the phrasing, from a guitar playing and songwriting point of view. I can hear the similarities, and I think it's important to have those kind of audible Easter eggs to your fans, especially on a sophomore record, because people can be going, don't change too much, but please progress. At the same time, there's this weird kind of
There's a sweet spot.
yeah, there is, isn't there, Orla? There's a sweet spot of kind of the progression, but not too much, which is hard to get right, as you were saying before, Rod. And well, they did it, didn't they? Just absolutely nailed it.
I don't know how you feel about this, Orla, but I feel like Meteora is almost a track-for-track replication of Hybrid Theory, but an evolution on every track.
I would wholeheartedly agree. Sorry, my voice is going. No, completely. I mean, even when I was younger, I used to get the tracks mixed up as to which song was on Hybrid Theory and which one was on Meteora.
Yeah.
But I'd always know, like, no, hang on. There was, even when I was younger, you could notice how they kind of perfected little things, how they're really even finding their sound even more, because obviously their sound was unique from the get-go and that resonated with people. But I think Meteora does just step up everything that they learned on Hybrid Theory, and they're like, okay, let's go up here with the next album. But it's just a feat of engineering. Like, it's so good.
Cool, man. Should we check out let's check out Somewhere We Belong. So Somewhere I Belong. Fucking hell. I say I'm a super fan and I get the name wrong.
I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real.
Holy shit, those lyrics they're really poignant and powerful, actually, especially the call and respond between Chester and Mike there. Actually, just thinking, it's actually caught me a bit off guard there.
It made me cry the last time I listened to it.
Yeah. As you get older and things make you more emotional, and I remember a couple of years ago I was literally just writing an Instagram post about Chester Bennington on the anniversary of his death, and you maybe put yourself in a completely different emotional position when you consider, the things maybe he was going through, how it all ended. Yeah, I got quite choked up just writing text on my phone, and you also look back and you understand how much these songs meant to you as well, and I think one of the really sad things about the passing of Chester is he contributed to a lot of amazing songs that helped people all over the world get through hard times, but they weren't enough to help him through what he was going through, and you listen to the lyrics in Somewhere I Belong and you just think, wow, you can have the height of success, but it's not enough. It's a difficult thing to process, but I mean, what a song, to go into some more kind of like technical analysis or whatever. I think what's very interesting is that I believe In the End was the last single from Hybrid Theory, and I personally would say In the End is the song that I believe most people think of when they think of Hybrid Theory. It's the kind of iconic track from the album. And while I don't think Somewhere I Belong is that for Meteora, I think it's very interesting that they use this as the first song. I think it was like, let's connect with that final single or that definitive song. And I think it was a really, really good stepping stone to take the band into new territories and into a new direction.
Definitely. And as you were saying about like when you're kind of older and you have kind of this retrospective vision of listening to the lyrics, I think it says a lot about the song itself, that you can either sit and listen to the lyrics and listen to what he was saying and like the call and response between the two, or you can just put the song on and really enjoy the music and just the song and not think about it too much. And I think it's kind of hard to do that with some songs. Like when there is emotional songs, sometimes it's impossible to not get caught up in the emotion. And in my case, end up crying every time I hear the song. Whereas with this song, I can cry to it, but also I can just like put it on like, this is a banger. Like you get the best of both, I think.
Something I saw a really good interview with Mike Shinoda very recently. I think he was on Howard Stern, and they were talking about what it was like being in the band with Chester, and they talked about how lyrically they would go to quite dark places and they would talk about their experiences. And what was very interesting is, they both came from very, very different backgrounds. Mike Shinoda was, a mixed race kid, and he talks about, Somewhere I Belong being about, because you've got these two cultures, people from, his Japanese side maybe didn't see him as Japanese. And I believe he's half Japanese, half Latino. And again, people on the Latino side, not feeling that he was that. I think he talks about not being able to speak Spanish and not being able to speak Japanese. So then he's kind of almost got three cultures because he's an American.
Yeah.
And then you have Chester, who had a very unconventional family background, being like a wild kid, and each of them kind of feeling that they had different things that the other one wished they had when they were young, but kind of sharing these kind of, I guess, feelings of being an outcast or being on the outside a little bit. But it's interesting now, given, I guess, I don't know, what's the way to say it, kind of like political tensions or racial tensions and whatever, that two people from very vastly different backgrounds actually can have very similar experiences and can bond over that things, even though they've walked completely different paths. I think that's something that we don't really see as much in the culture anymore. Maybe we focus on differences too much, but again, that to me was kind of quite striking and quite poignant, and that they can write these amazingly powerful songs about their experiences together, having had completely polarizing upbringing, but feeling that same sense of wanting to fit in, feeling like the outcast.
Yeah, that's a very poignant thing you said there, actually. When you are in that position where you're able to feel safe to write like that, if you're able to tap into that, it's quite a special place. And if you're able to do it not only from yourself, but if you're able to find someone who you can do that with in a safe space, because it's such a vulnerable place to be there, and can be quite daunting and frightening if you get into those scenarios. And like I was saying, with the call and respond there, it's interesting that you tell me that information, Rod, because that would suggest they're sharing experiences, calling out, responding, calling out, somewhere I belong. It's just so underlyingly powerful, and you can see why it just united people. That's the power of this stuff. And it's only because I'm jumping into Linkin Park really properly for the first time in my life today, and then having these, it's for me, just to reiterate this, is that I'm experiencing this music really properly for the first time as a 36-and-a-half-year-old man. It's a lot more visceral than I had anticipated, and it's definitely striking a chord with me, and especially with the things that you're both telling me about it and educating me on the background of the individuals of the band and the recording process. All these other caveats into this thing. It's undeniable just how important this record is, and we're with only three tracks in, for fuck's sake.
Should we hit up number 4?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Maybe I would say it's the first track that's really kind of Shinoda heavy, and then Chester kind of like rips it up in the chorus. Big riff. Like, I feel like that's the heaviest of when I was first listening to it, like, wow, that's the heaviest Linkin Park riff I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously in mixed wise as well. The guitars are more in the front than I've heard on many Linkin Park tracks. There's obviously a thing about that's a purposeful thing, as you're saying with the producer before. That's done on purpose.
Well, the guitarist talked a lot about wanting to take risks on the record,
Yes.
and was a guitarist who's very much into kind of layering and seeing it. And I think you see it as well, because like this is when Mike Shinoda, this is the record he starts playing guitar as well, just to kind of give it, extra depth live too. But I think you can really hear that. The most memorable thing about this song is just the line Chester has at the end of the chorus, where it's like, the very worst part of you is me. And it's like, going on to kind of where they went to lyrically on this record is like, wow, that's a powerful line for ultimately a band that, was embraced really by kind of young teenagers. I think it's probably maybe a little bit above their pay grade, but I think the reason this album has stuck with me for so long is, like all you were saying, it's like you can listen to it and it's just like boom, 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 but there's so much depth to it.
This song actually in particular, I kind of Mandela affected myself, because I could have swore it was released as a single, but like with the video and everything, but I guess not. Like it has
every Linkin Park track to me is the equivalent of a good band's single. That's how good they are. Yeah. Like the weakest track on the album would be, for most bands, their strongest track.
Yeah.
100%.
Should we check Hit the Floor?
There are just too many times that people have tried to look inside of me, wondering what I think of you when I protect you out of courtesy.
Oh man, I feel like 17 again.
Yeah,
Do you know?
Shinoda's got great flow there. Great flow, man. You can hear like some NWA phrasing in there, you know, some real proper down and dirty bars there. It's great. And the counterpart lines from the guitar and bass as well. You know, that's a real early hip hop stuff in there. That's great. I love that.
It's interesting as well, like as a band that, you know, a guy of kind of mixed like Japanese and Latin heritage would be confident enough to kind of jump out there and rap like this, you know, especially in those days. And I think, you know, obviously this record led on to the collaboration they did with Jay-Z. And, you know, that must have been the ultimate validation for someone like Mike Shinoda.
Yeah, you're not fucking around when someone like Jay-Z's like, yeah, let's do a record together.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
yeah.
I'll say what I'm going to say about Easy to Run after we just listen to like the track.
It's easier to run, replacing this pain.
So I'm going to come out with something really controversial here. To me, it's like, let's rewrite Crawling, and it doesn't work. It's still a great song, but it's the only track on the album that I would say I can identify its counterpart in Hybrid Theory, and it's inferior to. Discuss.
Interesting. I feel it's the one that hasn't given me that oh fuck so far. So I echo your sentiments there.
I never even realized that it does kind of sound like the counterpart to Crawling, and like Crawling is one of my favorite songs of all time, and the fact that it is like it, you can definitely hear its influence in it. That I don't even feel that in the slightest with this song is that kind of validates what you're saying as well.
Do you know, for me, where it falls down in, I consider Crawling to be like, it's the emotional release song, isn't it? Crawling in my skin. There's too many words in this. It's easier to run. Like, yeah, you know, there's just too much going on. It takes you so long to kind of identify what it is he's saying. Whereas I think in Crawling, it's like, it's just this visceral sense you get. It's like,
I was about to say visceral as well.
Yeah, but you get the emotion, just the sonic delivery. Whereas this, there's too many jumps, and you're like, what are you trying to say? You know, I think someone
to feel.
Yeah, exactly. I think someone who doesn't speak a word of English should listen to Crawling and just know what that song is about.
Great point.
You know, I think it's a great message. Like, you know, and you know, I'm a huge Andrew WK fan, and one of the big reasons about that is just I love positive outlooks, and I think Linkin Park, in, you know, with the message of It's Easier to Run, they are really getting into, you know, positive messages for people. But it was just a bit too complex, this, with the wording. It's a shame.
But as you were saying before, like a bad Linkin Park track is still a solid track.
It's better than anything I've ever written.
Yeah. Like, it's so incredible in its own right.
So we're going to go on to Faint.
A little bit of loneliness, a little bit of disregard, handful of complaints, but I can't help the fact that everyone can see these scars.
Oh my God, in the words of Lars Ulrich, God, that's what makes my dick hard. Fuck me. Jesus Lord, that's a proper song. I'm just in awe. I'm not even jealous. As a songwriter, everything I'd ever want to do in a song, but I know I could never produce something of this quality, no matter how hard I try. That's how in awe I am of Linkin Park. I mean, where do you start? The sample is so iconic. Chester's vocals, unbelievable singer, unbelievable screams. How does one man do those things? And the other thing that I'll give props for, I love this music video. The fact that up until the drop, where it's just Chester and he's talking the words of the chorus, you don't see the faces of the band. You know, you're just seeing those silhouettes. You know, Linkin Park have such a background in creative arts. You know, there's that real fusing of music and art and all of these things, but I feel like the video really connects with the message of the song, you know, and the way you first see Chester, like, it's the first time you see the face of the artist, and, you know, he's saying, I won't be ignored. And then it just kind of, boom, it's all focused on you actually seeing the faces of the band. Like, it just connects so well between, you know, the two forms of art, the visual and, you know, the music.
I never noticed that with the, like, say the lining up of I Won't Be Ignored and the showing of the faces, and then the two kind of sides to the video. Again, this is probably one of the first times I'm watching this video as a grown up. Like, I would have watched it loads as a kid, but like over my head.
Echoing kind of parts of what Orla was saying there, there's an incredible synergy of visual art, conceptual art, and writing, cinematography, all very cleverly interwoven together. And it's not until really, obviously, today for me, where I'm really looking at this from a completely different angle, and I'm having a ball right now, actually. Initially, I was like, cool, right, yeah, we'll do the Linkin Park thing. But I'm being very much as open book as I possibly can. And I'm having a ball right now listening to this and taking in the visual side of it, and obviously hearing some amazing caveats from you both before each track on this. The well-oiled machine that is Linkin Park is firing on all cylinders here from every aspect. You can't fault it. There's nothing you can take away and go, oh, hang on a minute, I wouldn't have done that. It's all so well, cleverly put together. And I think actually there's a testament to the time that we're talking about here. 20 years ago, there was time, there was faith behind labels to go, all right, what are you guys thinking here? All right, we'll help you, we'll push that. You don't really get that now. Maybe Falling in Reverse's last video is the first time I've seen that kind of push from a label or that avenue to explore freely.
Something to talk about, I think, just briefly though, you talk about the time that they were in, and I think something that's really interesting on the doc that we all watched was they put a mini studio in the back of one of their tour buses, because Hybrid Theory was such a big success. They toured and toured and toured non-stop, so they didn't really have a break or anything. But the bit where they talk about, come and have a look at our studio, and the computers are like the size of fridges.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Now you just think, well, I could just do it all on my mobile phone. It's crazy. And I think, Linkin Park were kind of similarly, you kind of mentioned this before, stuff with like, the move from vinyl to CDJs and whatever. But like great bands, like the Beatles, creating almost these techniques, being at the forefront of the technology. For me, Linkin Park were kind of like that first band of the 21st century, that the mixing of all of these things.
Yeah, it's really, you put a seed in my head there. There's a great link with this. The band Filter, there's a great documentary that they did, and that came out in about 98, 99, this documentary about Filter, and it's documenting their studio process and how they toured it live. And there's this amazing kind of foresight that Richard Patrick has, and he says, we're having a lot of the budget goes on taking all these computers out on the road, and they take up weight, time, all the electrical power to be able to make sure they're not going to fail each night. He says, he goes, yeah, I reckon in 10, 15 years time, we've got all this stuff. I reckon someone will be able to make it out of something that you can hold in your hand.
Yeah.
It's nuts that he predicts exactly what it is, because he just has that, because he's so into it, right? He's there living it day by day. He says, yeah, I think the way technology is going, you'll be able to do all of this, by doing a device in your hand. It is nuts. And it's so interesting you pick up on that these people are so into it that they're paving the way, predicting the future to where we have now. It's very, very interesting.
And now you nearly always hear of bands that are going on tour, like they have a studio on their bus, because like they're like writing all the time and producing all the time. Like it's nearly standard that, oh yeah, of course they have like a mini studio. Why wouldn't they?
Absolutely. Right, let's check out figure 9.
Didn't realize, instead of setting it free, I took what I hated and made it a part of me.
Let's just go straight into the lyrics. Again, there's just so much depth, but that concept of like, I took what I hated about you and I made it part of me. That's a powerful concept. And then obviously, the delivery and the chorus from Chester. It's dealing with some heavy stuff.
It's brave though. And that's the thing to admire, is that I think sadly the talk about mental health has kind of flipped the other way, where it's almost contrived to me personally nowadays, which is a shame. I think a couple of years ago it was really on top, but talking about this stuff 20 goddamn years ago, and really being heart on your sleeve then, and a lot of artists are, let's not beat around the bush there. A lot of artists are brave to do so, but when you're this big, when you've got this commercial pressure, when you've got all of that on your shoulders and you're still able to tap into that, you know, whether it's like they're not talking about, oh, well, we're a big band now, so I'll just write songs about being on tour. It's like comedians writing songs about airplane food after they've become successful and big, you know. They've kept true to themselves, hammered that in. It's brave. It's very brave.
But I think as well, it depends on your background and your experiences, because, you know, people always say write what you know, and there are some artists that, you know, just really well adjusted. They've had, you know, Bon Jovi isn't going to start singing about how it was, you know, about struggles and blah blah blah. It wouldn't be authentic. Whereas I think, you know, clearly, like, the experiences of the two lyricists in the band, you know, even though they've achieved kind of commercial success and whatever, you can reflect on different parts of your life, you know, and I think that's what they do authentic really well here.
I think as well, like, just talking about being brave and talking about mental health issues, especially back then, because they were basically the biggest band in the world at the time, it would nearly invite people to kind of being like, oh, like, who do you think you are? Like, you can't have issues. I have issues. Like, you're on top of the world. You don't really feel like this. But it kind of goes back to writing what you know, and how mental illness works is it doesn't matter how successful you are, how much money you have, still feel shit. Like,
Yeah.
But it's like going back to kind of what I was talking about, Shinoda, and the, like I said, the acceptance of, like, the hip hop community when, you know, Jay-Z wants to do a record with you. I mean, this is prior to that collaboration, and I'm sure, first off, as just a rock band in general, becoming the biggest rock band in the world, a lot of people go, you know, who's this? What's that? Do you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of snobbery about Linkin Park. You know, there were lots of people saying, "Oh, this is a manufactured band. This is a boy band. This is, you know." Nikki was guilty of that. But so that's an experience that you can have, I think, as well. Like for Mike, you know, are you going to be accepted? You know, and that's the thing. Are you going to be accepted by the rockers? Are you going to be accepted by the hip hop community? I think there's a lot of, even though they're the biggest band in the world, there's still kind of like some honest and some authentic kind of, I don't know, like underdog quality band too.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one the battles always choose, 'cause inside I realize.
Yeah, before you get to the lyrics there, the vocal performance is quite something, actually. The timbre that he's able to tap into is undeniably amazing, because to keep that resonance there's elements of you know, still keeping it there without going, you know, breaking into, you know, no pun, like into that high gear with the grit vocal and that compression in there that he naturally has when you're, you know, as Rod knows, we're similar in that way, where you really put the gas in on your vocal there and it really kind of distorts out. He's cleverly just laying off it in the right places, and then in that last chorus, you know, it's anyone's
Let's
game.
go.
Yeah, the gloves are off and he's fighting. It's what performance.
What I love about this song as well is the chorus vocals. He's just twisting the lyrics every single time. Like he's changing the lyrics. It's the melody that drives it. You know, that last chorus is a different lyrically to other choruses that have preceded it. Yet you still know it's the chorus, and it really just feel like it's building towards something constantly. And again, like, you know, we've talked about, they really meld the visual with the music too. I mean, like, I think it looks like it's a rotoscoped video, which is fucking cool. You know, and again, it's pushing the envelope on what you can do as the biggest band in the world. Do you know, could we just do a big budget music video with, you know, loads of fire and, I don't know, girls in bikinis, or could you do something that's genuinely really creative and it just fits so well with the song? Again, it's like they're one of the first bands that realizes there's going to be a visualization for every single track, and I think that's what they're demonstrating.
Yeah, the intellect that is on show here is high IQ, isn't it?
Should check out From the Inside.
Take everything from the inside and throw it.
Nice little swing on that one.
Yeah, that's a different flavour to the rest of the stuff that's on this record. And at first glance, it's taken me by surprise because of there's a rhythm, there's a heartbeat of the record, and this is the one that, to me, it's gone. What's, you know, there. So I'm having to pay closer attention to some of the parts. And I think maybe on more listens, I'll be able to grasp more of the concept at first. Yeah, again, it's straight away very poignant lyrics.
I think as well, it's another example of how Linkin Park really, they don't just put music to a video. They incorporate the meaning of the lyrics into the video and vice versa, and how both can be interlinked and part of this whole story that they're trying to get across as well, and also how different lyrics can be interpreted by different people. Like I really love this song with this video. I think it just works so well.
Yo, peep the style and the kids checking for it. The number one question is how could you ignore it?
I know this is very much more of like a hip hop based track, but the one thing that really stands out for me is the guitar work in the chorus. That dum dum dum. It's muted, but he lets it hang, which I think is really fucking cool.
Yeah, lets the compression of the guitar kind of go out with it. Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah, it's so Jay-Z, man.
Yeah.
So Jay-Z, dude. Like really early Jay-Z.
This is Joseph Hahn just having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
You know, he gets one track on every album. I feel like this is a more mature take on kind of what he brings to the band. It's
another example of taking what he'd learned from Hybrid Theory and was just like, okay, how do I make that better? How do I play around, but like make it sound more mature as well? Like he's clearly still having a bit of fun with it, but also taken everything that he's learned before and has just superseded anything.
Yeah, these last two tracks on the album, like they definitely have that sort of like Eastern flavor to them. I feel, you know, Hahn and Shinoda just kind of, I don't know, sending out a few signals, saying, you know, yeah, let's try and worm this in a good way.
That's great.
Right, it's time for the Big Daddy.
I've become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so
I do always think Jay-Z's going to say something when I hear this song now.
In my head, I'm like, encore, do you want more?
which is I don't know. It's a shame in some ways, but
yeah,
I love
know exactly what you mean.
Do you know?
It's like being a saint.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, I mean, I love this song. One of my favorite songs from Hybrid Theory was "Pushing Me Away," which was the last track on the album. And you know, I've said this a few times. It feels like Meteora is every track on Hybrid Theory just reimagined and pushed to the next stage of the evolution. And I think "Pushing Me Away" was like a song I was like, oh, that could have been a single, but like "Numb" is the song that it could have been, and you know, just kind of exceeds it in every measure. I think.
I think it's interesting that they did leave "Numb" to the last song. Like it's really ending on a high. Like they didn't try and like either peter off or kind of have the last few tracks as you kind of come down and just take a breather. "Numb" just kind of shoots it right back up. And it's because I was younger when this came out. I was just thinking of like little 9-year-old, 10-year-old me being just like, yeah, I am so numb. I'm so troubled. I was not.
Again, like, you know what? Going into the lyrics, like that middle eight, that kind of it's the middle eight that just kind of leads into this crescendo to take you into the last chorus. But that line is like, you know, you're just like me with someone who is disappointed in you. It's like
that one got me when I was older.
Yeah, you know, that's like. You know, and I think that's the great thing. And, you know, we've probably talked about it a bit on this channel. You know what? There are bands who, you know, politics and whatever is part of their thing. You know, I'm a massive Rage Against the Machine fan. But I don't know. It's like now we're in an age where bands are kind of singing about what's happening at the moment. Whereas I just think the source material for, I think, the entire Meteora record is just universal feelings that doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what your life experiences have been. They're just singing about human emotion and connection. And like we said about Chester and Mike coming from completely different upbringings, but they come together to create this amazing, amazing work. You know, it is literally like music that's not going to alienate anyone. You know, if you write a song about, I don't know, how you think Boris Johnson's an idiot, well, do you know what? Like, there are going to be a small number of people maybe who don't think he's an idiot, and you'll disconnect with those people. Whereas, you know, when you write about universal feelings that we all go through, there can be people that are in drastically different scenarios, who have completely antithetical worldviews, but they can connect together again, by listening to music like this. And, that's the thing that, when I was a kid, that I thought that's what rock and roll music was about. Like, doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Let's just get down together and have a good time. And yeah, maybe I long for the world of 2003. I mean, I'd still be on a major label, so it would have been great for me. Maybe that's what I miss. All the freebies.
I would like to echo everything you both said about this song and about this record. It's the album's ballad, isn't it? In my opinion, nothing wrong with a fucking ballad. Ballad is a terrible name for music, but
I don't know. Michael Bolton's done well out of them, hasn't he?
He has done very well. Yes, yeah.
Great voice as well.
Shout out to the Bolton. Yeah, it's the poignancy of this record, and just to kind of arc onto something what you were saying, Rod, about bands like Rage Against the Machine and stuff. In my opinion, great band Rage Against the Machine, but it has not aged very well at all. When you compare the caliber of writing, I know they're not the same genre or anything like that. I understand that, but if you're trying to dissect and understand the difference between something that's very heavily political and something that is a bit more real, for me, in my opinion, and as people, how we interact with one another, the struggle. Technology in the world has changed so much in that time, for better or worse. But one thing that has definitely stayed the same is that people's feelings and emotions on how you grow as a human being, especially in those formative years as a teenager, they don't change. The environment does, but the process does not, and that's become very evident, harking back to as well what you were saying before about being a parent now. And maybe there's teachings and lessons in this to maybe put on to me as a parent. Maybe I can look at how my kids will grow in a different way, and hopefully be supportive in a more practical manner. It has so much power, and if anything, it has become more poignant, more important as time has gone on. Now, I will say this gently. Are we listening to this differently because of the passing of Chester?
I totally agree. And like, even as you're saying that, are we listening to it differently now given what happened with Chester? I feel like I definitely listen to it differently, but in a sense I listen to it in a more elevated sense than I did before. Like, before he passed away, like, I'd still put this on and, have a cry or have a scream or whatever, and like drive in my car with speakers blaring and still have it resonate with me. And although there is kind of an extra tone of sadness listening to anything by Linkin Park now, knowing what happened, it's still the same. It still resonates on a very similar level, just maybe a bit elevated now. Like, I think that's the only difference for me listening to it.
Just to kind of jump in on that, like, I listen to bands like Nirvana or Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden, Audioslave, bands who have had, the singer pass, and it doesn't strike me as hard as it does with Linkin Park. And I think that's because Chester was of my generation. For example, Scott Weiland died, when I was, a huge Pilots fan.
Yeah.
They were always a band that had just always been that band. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'm sure someone who's maybe 10, 15 years older than me may get those feelings when they listen to Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, I think
it's that connection.
So right there.
Yeah.
I think even though my heart lies more in that genre and those artists, I think actually dissecting it in a way like this has probably hit me a bit harder than I thought.
Anyway,
right, we'll
wrap it up.
Yeah,
right. You wrap it up, Nikki.
Okay. Right, what a ride. An amazing time. Thanks for sharing the time with us. And I've learned so much about this record that I never thought I would, and also experienced it in a way that I never thought I would. And I've had the best goddamn time with it, as well as it's being very somber in places as well. Rod, thank you as always. Orla, thank you as always. Guys, make sure you like, follow and subscribe, and we will see you soon.